What's happening, y'all? So we got a nice little update for you for the week of April 27th through May 3rd, which is today. So let's show you what came up over the past week. So there were five instances that actually were reported by the Department of Labor over the past week. Adult long-term care, which we could kind of lump that into healthcare in a sense. Maintenance company, a restaurant, and believe it or not, the same city had violations for their firefighters and also paramedics. So digging into this, you could tell quite a few people were affected just by these investigations. And again, these are 2-year look-back periods for these investigations. So 42 for the adult long-term care, 51 in the maintenance company, 10 at the restaurant, 154 firefighters, which is a pretty significant number, and of course, 18 paramedics for the same exact city. So what exactly happened? Well, the adult long-term care facility, they denied overtime wages and they basically required the caregivers to sign these contracts, basically excluding them from overtime. In exchange, they would get an extra dollar per hour worked. And basically, the owner on purpose created a second payroll to try and hide the fraud. And didn't pay them overtime, but paid them the extra dollar premium for all hours worked. So clearly some scary stuff happening here. This maintenance company issued separate paychecks to their workers in an effort to try and mask overtime wages, which is a pretty crazy thing because the company they were writing the checks from was kind of a shell company as a subcontractor. So kind of some shady stuff. And basically they paid straight time rate for any overtime hours that were worked. A restaurant which was in Hawaii, they misclassified their chefs as management and basically denied overtime. So they also failed to keep all working hours, in all appropriate documentation to prove what these folks actually worked. So believe it or not, this restaurant made a big boo-boo. Now, this city that was in Indiana had a group of firefighters and paramedics, but the firefighters in their specific region, they were scheduled to work up to 120 hours every 2 weeks, but didn't receive overtime for hours worked over 106. So that specific city paid overtime or time and a half of compensation to these firefighters if they worked over 106 hours. And most of them, like we said, worked up to 120 hours, if not even more. And then the paramedics, on the other hand, they technically would be owed overtime if they worked past 106 hours. However, because they had no involvement in fire suppression, they were actually due overtime after 40 hours. So they were denied that as well. So how much was paid in back wages and liquidated damages? So clearly not a small amount of penalties that were paid out over the past week just in judgment. But the adult long-term care facility paid well over $500,000, both in back wages and liquidated damages. So half of that is the actual wages owed to employees, and the other half was liquidated damages, kind of a slap on the wrist to say, well, you messed up, so here's your penalty. The maintenance company paid well over $333,000 in back wages and liquidated damages, and also were assessed a $15,000 civil money penalty because of their willful nature. The restaurant, over $100,000 in back wages and liquidated damages, and also over $4,000 civil money penalty, again, due to the willful nature of this employer's involvement in what they did. The firefighters saw $319,000, excuse me, of back wages paid to them. And again, half of that is liquidated damages. But believe it or not, excuse me, the city did not pay liquidated damages because they're a city agency. So obviously the government did not disclose that they were charged liquidated damages. And the paramedics, $353,000 worth of compensation. So clearly a lot of money going to the paramedics for sure. So if we break this down, I mean, this is not an accurate representation of what each person's going to get. This is just breaking down what the average is based on their violations that they did have. The adult long-term care average was $12,000, almost $13,000 per person. The maintenance company over $6,000, $6,500 in wages and liquidated damages. The restaurant here would be paying each of their people, if they did work the exact same amount, over $10,000 per person. So quite a big chunk of money. Out of the firefighters, over 2K. And the paramedics for sure takes the cake, almost $20,000 worth of wages that would be due on average back to the paramedics. So not a small amount of money due back to these folks for sure. So a really good week for employees to be getting their money back and getting the pain and suffering taken care of as well. So what did we learn this time? Well, this time it's like, come on, why in the hell would you have somebody sign a contract to sign their overtime rights away for an extra buck? I mean, are you really that strapped for cash? I mean, if you're going to be an employer, don't try and do some shady crap like that. Like, just pay your people their wages. Also, pay the wages on the same paycheck. Don't sit there and split the paychecks up in hopes that you're going to have to pay, straight time out of one bank account, overtime out of another bank account. I mean, clearly you have this in a general ledger in the background of your system anyway. So on paper, it could say something different, but taking it out of separate bank accounts is even more shady. And before you start exempting people that are hourly in nature and don't have any type of executive, administrative, or professional exemption ability, I would probably take a really close look at that before you start exempting chefs and make them exempt from overtime. And we've seen this a bunch this year. I mean, keeping accurate records of working hours. I mean, come on, why in the world would you be doing things on paper at this point? I mean, look, I'm a little naive and I don't know every employer situation, but I can certainly say if you're doing things on paper, there are plenty of softwares out there that can track this on record and electronic record for you. And the other piece, firefighters are due overtime in general, like they can't be exempted from overtime, nor paramedics. And that's a strict rule by the Fair Labor Standards Act. In the Department of Labor's verbiage, I even have a estimator that kind of looks at the potential fines that you can have if you exempt folks who are firefighters or paramedics. And it's not a small civil money penalty or fine that you could potentially see, but basically every city's a little bit different. They may pay overtime after X number of hours, but they set the standard, and it just so happened in this city of Indiana, they wanted, it wasn't the city of Indiana, but in this particular place, 106 hours was that. But also paramedics who don't have any involvement in fire suppression, basically they're due overtime after 40 hours. So quite a bit of stuff that came up this week. So thank you so much for watching this update. I really appreciate your support. Please like and subscribe if you would like to. I'd love to have you donate as well. Again, appreciate everybody's support and checking this out. Y'all have a great rest of your week and see you next week.